Congressman, it's great to see you again. Let me just ask you, did you have any indication, any insight as to whether or not this was happening tonight when the president was returning to the White House for this national security meeting?
Not directly, they didn't say that, but certainly from what President Trump has said, the repositioning of the B-2 bombers and other forces, and just his general vibe the last several days, it was not surprising. But no, there was no heads up that I'm aware of given to any congressional leaders.
I read your statement that you posted, which I think there are a lot of very important parts to it, and I wanted to kind of just go, through it with you a little bit. One of the points that you made, which I have not yet heard this evening from any American officials, and certainly as I read some statements from American officials, members of Congress, questioning the legality of this strike. You went a step further. You said the president failed to provide clear objectives for these actions, and there are no guarantees that it will eliminate the possibility of Iran developing a nuclear weapon or how long it might set their program back. Elaborate on that and why you thought that was important to include tonight.
Sure. Several pieces to this. I mean, first of all, obviously, there are other issues with Iran than just their nuclear program. They are sponsoring a variety of different terrorist groups throughout the region, destabilizing governments. They have a ballistic missile program that is a threat. But on the nuclear program, the only thing that stopped the Iranian nuclear program was the JCPOA that President Obama negotiated. Everyone agrees that Iran was abiding by that, and they had stopped enriching uranium, and they had stopped moving towards developing a bomb. And then, of course, President Trump tore up the agreement, and Iran went back to enriching uranium and moving towards the bomb. Now, the military estimations, can you stop this? Can you drop a bunch of bombs and blow up all the centrifuges that we know about? We don't know that. Now, President Trump, in his typical fashion, claims facts not in evidence, saying we totally obliterated their whole program. Nobody knows that right now. Maybe, maybe not. We do not know how many of these centrifuges were destroyed. So that's number one. Number two, we can't be 100% sure that we knew about all of Iran's centrifuges. We didn't know about Fordo for about a decade before we discovered it. And number three, no one has talked about, well, how quickly could Iran reconstitute all of this? It sadly does not take that long to build centrifuges once you know how. So it's not necessarily the death blow to Iran's nuclear program. We're still going to have to negotiate with them at some point. So, this assumption that their nuclear program is gone and they'll never be able to build it is simply wrong at this point.
You used the word condemn in the strongest terms the president's decision. Again, I think very powerful words tonight. And you also said that the path the president has chosen risks unleashing a wider war in the region that is both incredibly unpredictable and treacherous, and that threatens the safety and the security of the United States, Israel, and ultimately the world. I get a sense, sir, and please correct me if I'm wrong, based on that language, you're extremely disappointed with what the president has done tonight.
Well, disappointed would be the wrong word, because disappointed implies expectations. But I think it was wrong. I think it was a mistake. And the point is, we have forces throughout the region, in Qatar, in Bahrain, in Iraq, in the UAE. I was just there, as it happens, 2 months ago, in all of those countries and visited our forces. And they are all very vulnerable to Iranian attack. Now, we'll see. I mean, the future is notoriously hard to predict. Who knows for sure what Iran is going to do? But I'd sure be surprised if Iran simply capitulated at this point. And if they attack, all of those forces are at jeopardy. Now, we have force protection methods in place. They're not perfect. They're not necessarily going to protect all of our forces. And if Iran does that, then what does the president do in response? Does he just let that go? That seems unlikely. Look, this is the same thing back in Iraq. Saddam Hussein was a terrible guy. We didn't know whether or not Saddam Hussein was working towards a nuclear weapon back then because he wasn't being transparent about it. And you can imagine a world, well, gosh, if we just remove this guy, how much better would things be? Sure, but you don't know what comes next. And that's the lesson we learned. President Trump has not said anything yet about whether or not regime change is part of his objective. If it is, that's incredibly problematic. If it isn't, he should state clearly that it isn't. The best we can hope for now is that Iran does feel, backed into a corner is the wrong word. Iran decides to capitulate. and they come out and they negotiate in good faith, and we get to a peaceful resolution. But that is a huge roll of the dice. And then, of course, there is the constitutional issue that the president had no authority to start a war with Iran, which, make no mistake about it, that's what he did. Where that war goes, hard to say, but he started a war with Iran tonight.
And what do you think is Israel's responsibility in getting the U.S. into this moment? I mean, the president is certainly, by some assessment, and again, you used very strong language against the president of the United States. What responsibility does Israel have for starting this war 9 days ago, knowing ultimately that America was always going to come to Israel's defense at some point and perhaps even get involved in this war on behalf of Israel? I mean, it's safe to say the United States would not have been doing this tonight if Israel had not started this unprovoked war 9 days ago.
Yeah, sorry, that last sentence I got to get back to in just a second. But I'm a big personal responsibility person. This isn't Israel's fault. It's not Israel's fault that Donald Trump decided to bomb. Yeah, they wanted him to, but he's the president of the United States. He doesn't have to do what Israel tells him to do. So let's not make any mistake about that. Second, Iran has definitely been provoking Israel. Iran, from its founding, has had it as one of its central tenets that Israel doesn't have a right to exist, which is, pretty much an unprecedented foreign policy, except for Russia now in Ukraine. Iran has supported Hezbollah, Hamas, the Houthis, and various other groups that have directly attacked Israel. So that Israel had a reason to attack Iran, I will not question. The U.S. doesn't. And the U.S., as I mentioned, has forces in the region and they are at risk. There is no question that Prime Minister Netanyahu and Israel put a ton of pressure on Donald Trump to do this. He didn't have to. He could have put our interests, sorry, I'm just going to go ahead and say it. He could have put America first, but it doesn't seem like that's the decision that he made. And the consequences of it going forward are, as I have said, very unpredictable and certainly dangerous for U.S. interests.
I'm sure you've seen, certainly within the MAGA world and within the Republican Party, some who agree with you that this